All right, today we are going to do long division of polynomials. And so that's taking what you learned in like the 4th grade and stepping it up a notch for Algebra 2. So we'll start by recalling what you did in 4th grade. When you were dividing with long division, and we set it up, we're dividing 6945 by 34. You would take this and you would divide this 34 into the first ones you can get, which would be into 69. So 34 divides into 69 2 times. So we would put the 2 right over the 9 to keep everything organized. Then we would do 2 times 34 and we get 68. And then we subtract that. 69 minus 68 is 1. We drop this 4. Now, 34 does not go into 14, so we would put a 0 over that 4 and drop the 5. And 34 goes into 145 4 times, so we would line up that 4 with the 5, and we would multiply 4 times 34 to get 136. We then subtract. Now 34 does not go into 9, so this would be considered the remainder. And so you either wrote 204 with a remainder of 9, or you wrote 204 9 over 34. And so that was your answer when you did long division in 4th grade. Now we're going to change that up into, we're going to divide polynomials with variables. But where the process is exactly the same as what we just did there. So there's an example right here where we're dividing x cubed plus 3x squared plus 3x plus 2 by x squared plus x plus 1. We're going to go ahead and do some together. Sometimes you will see this as dividing written as a fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and write that just so that you can recognize that as well. So you can write the division like this, or you can write the division as a fraction like that. You would want to set up that x squared plus x plus 1 on the outside, and then your dividend on the inside. All right, so let's get started with some of these polynomials here. I set up my x minus 2 on the outside, and my x squared plus 5x minus 14 on the inside. We take this very first term and we divide it by the first term here. So x squared divided by x is x. So I'm going to line that up with the x. Just trying to keep all my information really organized. I then multiply x times x and I get x squared. And x times negative 2 gives me a negative 2x. Now we're ready to subtract. Now you are subtracting the whole thing, so I like to put parentheses around it just to remind me I am subtracting the entire thing, not just the x squared minus x squared. So x squared minus x squared is 0, that cancels out. 5x minus a negative 2x is 7x. Be very careful with that second one. That's where we see a lot of mistakes, is people forget to subtract that second one. Now the negative 14 will come down, and we're ready to start that process again. So we take this first term and divide it by the first term. So 7x divided by x is 7. We then multiply 7 times x, and we get 7x, and 7 times negative 2, which gives me negative 14. Again, I'm subtracting the entire thing. So 7x minus 7x is 0. That's going to cancel. If we've done it correctly, that first one should always cancel. And then negative 14 minus a negative 14 is 0. So this one does not have a remainder, and my answer would be x plus 7. All right, we'll try another one now. I'll put my x minus 6 on the outside. That's our divisor. I'll put my dividend on the inside, so x squared minus 2x minus 48. I start with my first term and divide by my first term here. So x squared divided by x is x. We multiply x times x minus 6. So x times x is x squared, and x times negative 6 is negative 6x. We're ready to subtract. X squared minus x squared is 0. Negative 2x minus a negative 6x gives me a positive 4x, and this negative 48 comes down. I take this first term, 4x, and divide by x, and that is 4. 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times negative 6 gives me a negative 24. I'm ready to subtract. 4x minus 4x is 0, so that goes away. Negative 48 minus a negative 24 gives me a negative 24. Now, x cannot go into this constant, so we can't divide that negative 24 by x. That doesn't go in there. So this right here is my remainder. And so let's practice writing that. If we get that x plus 4, which is my answer up here, and then negative 24 over x minus 6. Or x plus 4, remainder of negative 24. All right, we're going to step it up a little bit here and try another one. So I put my divisor out on the outside, so 3x plus 1. I put my dividend on the inside, so 3x cubed minus 5x squared plus 10x minus 3. There are 4 terms here, but the process is still the same. You're always taking that first term and dividing it by the first term. So 3x cubed divided by 3x is x squared. I keep that lined up. So I've lined up my x squareds. It keeps everything a lot more organized and easier to follow. X squared times 3x gives me a 3x cubed. X squared times 1 gives me an x squared. And I'm ready to subtract. 3x cubed minus 3x cubed is 0. That goes away. Negative 5x squared minus an x squared gives us a negative 6x squared. The 10x is going to come down. And we're ready to do it again. So negative 6x squared divided by 3x gives us a negative 2x. We multiply negative 2x times everything over here to get that next line. So negative 2x times 3x gives me a negative 6x squared. And negative 2x times 1 gives me a negative 2x. I'm ready to subtract. And again, I'm subtracting the entire thing. So negative 6x minus negative 6x squared is 0. That goes away. And 10x minus a negative 2x gives us a 12x. Be very careful with those signs. Now we drop this negative 3, and we start the process again. So 12x divided by 3x is 4. 4 times 3x gives us 12x, and 4 times 1 gives us 4. We are ready to subtract. And so 12x minus 12x is 0. That goes away. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. And so my answer here would be x squared minus 2x plus 4 plus a negative 7 over 3x plus 1. All right. We're going to move to some a little bit harder now on the back here, just to make sure that you have seen all of the different types. All right, in this one here, the first thing I notice is that there is not an x cubed. So all the ones we've dealt with so far go down in exponents. 4 Now there's no 3 here, 2, 1, and then 0. So you are going to want to put a placeholder for that x cubed just to keep things organized. So you would put 0x cubed in that place so that there is something there to keep the stuff organized, but 0 times anything is 0. So I'm going to set up my x minus 2 on the outside, and then on the inside we do x to the 4th plus 0x cubed minus 7x squared plus 9x minus 10. So we have placed a 0 x cubed right here as a placeholder so that the exponents are all in order. That keeps things really organized and keeps you from making silly mistakes. All right, so we start from the first term here. We're going to divide x to the 4th divided by x, and that's x cubed. And now we multiply x cubed times x minus 2. So x cubed times x is x to the 4th, and x cubed times negative 2 is negative 2x cubed. That's the reason for our placeholder here, so that we've got somewhere to organize our information. We're keeping those exponents the same. And so I can now subtract x to the 4th minus x to the 4th is 0. 0x cubed minus a negative 2x cubed is a positive 2x cubed. And now we can drop our negative 7x squared there. We take our first term, 2x cubed divided by x. That is 2x squared. We multiply 2x squared times this entire quantity. So 2x squared times x is 2x cubed. And 2x squared times negative 2 is a negative 4x squared. We subtract negative 7x squared minus a negative 4x squared gives us a negative 3x squared. Our 9x is now going to come down. We do the process again. This one does have more steps just because we had more in our dividend here. So we've got to do it a couple more times, but the process is still the same. Negative 3x squared divided by x is negative 3x. We multiply negative 3x times x gives us a negative 3x squared. Negative 3x times negative 2 gives us a positive 6x. We subtract negative 3x squared minus negative 3x squared is 0. 9x minus 6x is 3x. And our negative 10 is now going to come down. And we start this process again. So 3x divided by x is 3. 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. When I subtract, my 3x's cancel. Negative 10 minus a negative 6 gives us a negative 4. And that right there would be our remainder since x cannot go into 4. So our answer is x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x plus 3 plus a negative 4 over x minus 2. You can see this with that negative out here instead of putting it there. But once we have remainders that are bigger, sometimes it gets a little bit confusing with signs. So I show it to students like this with the negative just so that they don't make a mistake with the signs. All right, on number 6 here, you'll see something that looks a little bit hard, looks like it's going to be harder because now we're dividing by a quadratic instead of a linear. The process again is still the same. We're going to put that polynomial on the outside. And then we're going to put the x cubed minus x squared minus 21x plus 45 on the inside. And this is actually shorter because x cubed divided by x squared is x. So we're all the way over here to keep things lined up, so there's not going to be as many steps. That gives me an x cubed plus 2x squared minus 15x when I multiply that. And we want to subtract that entire thing. X cubed minus x cubed is 0. Negative x squared minus a 2x squared is a negative 3x squared. And negative 21x minus a negative 15x is a negative 6x. I bring down my 45, and I'm ready to do it again. So negative 3x squared divided by x squared is negative 3. We multiply negative 3 times x squared gives us a negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times 2x gives us a negative 6x, and negative 3 times negative 15 gives us a positive 45. And we are subtracting that entire thing. When we do that, every single one of these cancel out, so we have no remainder on this one, so our answer is x minus 3. When there's no remainder there, that means it's a factor, and we'll get to that on our next lesson, but start thinking about that. All right, we're going to do one more together. One with a bigger remainder so you can see that part. So I'm going to put the x squared plus 3 on the outside and the 8x cubed plus 5x squared plus 12x plus 10 on the inside here. I take my 8x cubed and I divide it by x squared, and that is 8x. Again, we keep that lined up, so we're going to be all the way over here, so we already know there's going to be less steps on this one. 8x times x squared gives us 8x cubed. 8x times 3 gives me 24x. I'm going to want to line that up with the x value. Since we didn't have an x right here, nothing ended up right here. That's okay. You want to keep the things lined up though, because remember when we add and subtract, we are combining like terms, so we can only combine the ones that are like ones. So 8x cubed minus 8x cubed is 0. This one would just come down, or you can think about subtracting 0 from it. It's going to be the same thing. And then 12x minus a 24x gives us a negative 12x. And then our 10 comes down. Now we do the same thing again. We take our first term and divide by our first term. That is 5. 5 times x squared gives us 5x squared. And 5 times 3 gives us 15. So I'm going to keep that lined up there. We're ready to subtract. 5x squared minus 5x squared is 0. We can bring this one down. And then 10 minus 15 gives us a negative 5. Now I would start to divide again, but x squared does not go into x. So this is my remainder here. I can't go any further, so that's the remainder. And so my answer here would be 8x plus 5 plus a negative 12x minus 5 over x squared plus 3. This is where I was telling you that you could put the sign out here, but then it gets weird. If you put a minus here, you would have to distribute it to both of these. So both of those would become plus. That's why it's sometimes just easier to put the plus there and leave the signs alone for the remainder. There is our answer. That is long division.